What are the perks of being an entrepreneur? What comes to mind for you? Is it setting your own schedule, being your own boss, setting your own price points, working weird hours, taking breaks when you want to, vacations when you want to? This is important. It's definitely something I enjoy, as being a serial entrepreneur myself. What if I told you there's actually a challenge with entrepreneurs? Some of you wouldn't be surprised because you're living it, you're breathing it, you embody it. The challenge that we know now is that entrepreneurs have a greater risk of mental health conditions. It's almost a chicken and egg question. Which came first, their entrepreneurial spirit, which leads to mental health being of higher risk, or is it their mental health that contributes to their creativity as an entrepreneur? It's definitely something I'm fascinated by as a mental health therapist and entrepreneur myself. So what kind of conditions are we talking about from a mental health lens? Entrepreneurs from this study were shown to have an increased risk, 49%, of anxiety, bipolar disorder, and ADHD, as just 3 examples. That population of self-identified entrepreneurs were saying that they were suffering from these conditions. They'd been diagnosed or they tested as having those conditions. What's that mean? Well, anxiety as an entrepreneur kind of makes sense. How's my business doing? I'm constantly thinking about my business. What can I do to improve it? That may or may not be something you relate to as a driven professional yourself. ADHD, creativity. Does it manifest that way? Like, ooh, squirrel, shiny thing, new project. Is that something that you're tracking for yourself? Bipolar disorder, the mania of high productivity, not needing to sleep, really knocking things out, versus the lows of depression, barely getting out of bed, struggling with the business, fantasizing about selling it. That's just some examples. So with this in mind, I think there's a deeper dive of what we can do in the self-care lens, knowing that we are more susceptible to mental health conditions as entrepreneurs. What can we do? What's in our control? Self-care is in our control. Are you taking breaks? Have you scheduled yourself a lunch? Do you make sure not to work weekends or to have a set schedule that works for you? This can be part of the equation, is knowing what works and what doesn't work, so that you don't embrace burnout or workaholism as 2 things that might come secondary to mental health conditions. Is part of the mental health condition and entrepreneurial risk being higher that we procrastinate, that we struggle, that it's hard for us to ask for help? These are things you might want to reflect on for yourself. Do you relate? I think the pros outweigh the cons, but for so many people, just knowing that they're more susceptible to mental health is important. It's empowering to say, what can I take control over? What can I do to track this? What are my warning signs of decline? These might be things that you're tracking for yourself. So let's talk about those warning signs. If we know that you're more susceptible as an entrepreneur to anxiety, ADHD, bipolar disorder, etc., how do we track that? Knowing your warning signs can help. So what's it look like when I'm well? That's the first question to ask. Are you animated, focused, energized? Is it easy to get out of bed? Do you take care of yourself? Do you follow through on your self-care plan? Those might be some things that you answer in the column of what's it look like when I'm well. For the question next, it's what does it look like when I'm unwell? What are your warning signs? Are you forgoing lunch to answer more emails? Are you forgetting to walk? Are you staying up later than you should just to fit in another deadline? Are you answering emails on weekends? Are you finding yourself restless, keyed up, muscle tension, sleep disruption? That list could be very unique to you. So knowing your warning signs matters of what's it look like when I'm well versus unwell. The next step is, what are you going to do with that information? What can you do about that? Is it having an accountability buddy? Is it taking a step to carve in self-care every single week? Is it blocking out your lunches, saying that these are sacred, not to mess with them, not to take appointments? Is it crafting your ideal schedule and trying to hold yourself to it? Is it having your spouse, partner, best friend, colleague hold you accountable just to get you into a flow as you adjust some things to prevent those mental health conditions from manifesting? Is that where you have a sense of control? So yes, it's kind of alarming to hear that 49% of entrepreneurs have a greater risk of mental health conditions. The negative is, does that lead to burnout, workaholism, and some of the things we're tracking here? The positive is, does it actually contribute to their creativity? Is there some wonderful things about mental health and entrepreneurship that actually go well together? That creative spirit, can we channel that versus the anxiety, ADHD connection? It's some food for thought as you feel like you're crafting your wellness plan. Having those warning signs identified, knowing what it looks like when you're well and unwell, can be one step in the right direction, recognizing that entrepreneurs have mental health conditions, or at least have a greater risk of them.